All right, cool. So let's go ahead and jump into this. So real quick introductions. My name is Dan Jordan. I am a senior PS consultant here at Cribl. Been here since last August. So coming up on my year here in a little bit. And today we're going to kind of, as you can see, deployment best practices. So as a PS guy, I kind of thought that, well, if we do deployment best practices, I'm kind of giving away all of our secrets and everything. So I figured we'd just spend a couple hours going through a slide deck of my vacation from last year. So hopefully everyone's cool with that, and we'll just kind of jump through some pictures here.
This looks good.
So starting off here, top of the world, and then we did some Hell's Gate recovery. So obviously.
Are you in the gladiator?
I wouldn't invite me back if I went through all that. So we'll actually do some work stuff here, but thought everyone might like that. But we can do a separate session if anyone wants to see some pictures and some videos. So, but it was a blast. If anyone hasn't been out to Moab, it was a great time. So back to his work stuff. So we'll go through, I know it was just kind of deployment planning, but I really, as I was thinking through it, figured, deployment is only one piece of kind of the whole puzzle here. And as we're going through it and as we work with customers, it's really about the entire process, so deployment is there. But as many of you know, the deployment piece is really only a small bit of it. So a lot of it goes into pre-deployment. How do we set this up? How do we architect it, sizing? The deployment piece, hopefully, if we've done everything correctly up to that point, we'll go smoothly and we'll just kind of, roll through it. And then post-deployment, obviously, once we've got stream in, once we kind of got everything deployed, the architecture looks good. It's kind of that maintenance and what do we do kind of after and how do we manage a lot of the pieces in there? Because again, the deployment piece, at least from my experience, just installing, probably one of the easiest products I've ever had to install and get up and running. It's kind of everything else that goes with it that, kind of takes a little bit of work too. So then we'll kind of just finish up with working with PS. I know that, we've worked with a lot of customers, maybe some of you are on the call here. But kind of how should we work with you and what are some of the kind of self-help stuff that we have available? So I know that, that's kind of everywhere on the community, but it's always good to kind of refresh on that. So pre-deployment. I'm not going to go through kind of in depth on sizing. There is a great office hours out there on sizing. Feel free to check that out. So that's going to be, everything about it. How do you do it? When you look at all the different pieces, what goes into sizing. Again, our SC team is great about kind of doing that up front and, sizing everything out correctly. So most of the time, by the time it gets to us as in PS, we've kind of gone through that exercise. But, for those that aren't working with an SE or, you're looking at resizing or doing something different, that's a great office hours. And then we've also got this sizing tool here, which Brendan did, which is really awesome. So it's just criblesizing.info. This is really super simple, and I don't want to take anything away from the SEs because they'll go into much more depth on building some of this stuff out. But if you want to kind of come in here and look at, just how much, maybe if you're going to expand. So if you're looking at adding some inbound or some outbound data, what does that look like from a processor point of view? How many machines do I need to spin up? How do I scale out to, kind of meet the needs of whatever I'm trying to do? So if you haven't seen, yeah.
And don't mean to cut you off, but it seems, I don't know if anybody else on the audio side, it seems like it's like fading in and out. So I don't know if there's something a little, like for me, it definitely is, but I don't know if my voice is doing the same thing and it's just this.
No, your sound's fine. How about mine?
It's Dan.
Is that better? Testing 1, 2, 3. Better?
Second his statement. It's a little in and out, but.
Yeah, it sounds better now, Dan. I think if you have a Yeti, I think it just where the Yeti
probably just had the gain down.
Yeah.
All right, let me know if it starts to crack up again. How's that?
Sounds good now.
Okay, cool. So if you haven't seen this, jump into this again. I'm not going to go through this today, but just wanted to let everyone know that it's available out there. That it's a great tool there. Also, when you're sizing and kind of thinking about your architecture and where you're going to start putting things, think about geography. So where is the data coming from? Where are these events being sourced from? Cribl does, our stream, catch myself doing that all day, but Stream's got, this concept of stream to stream, and we can do, you're not going to get charged twice for that. So if you've got a lot of events coming from, say, a smaller site, you want to set up, a worker group on that site, we can do that stream to stream connection. And there's also compression involved in that as well. So we can compress that across the links if you've got a site with, a smaller connection. So, think about that as you're sizing, as you're kind of looking at your worker groups. And we'll go into worker groups in a little bit too, but, think about that as you're doing the sizing piece, and the network sizing, obviously, as kind of data people and app people, I see this, we don't always think about the network piece of that. And, that's important. So we want to make sure that, if we are pushing terabytes of data, that we've got the links to support that, and that, those are correctly sized on both sides, and that we have that as part of our planning as well. And then when we think about architecture, have a plan. Make sure that you've got everything included. I'm not going to say that, we have any customers that do this, but, as years of doing this, sometimes we get some architectures that aren't fully vetted out. And I'm sure everyone's seen that. For the pros on the call here, that if you don't have every single piece laid out, and, who owns those, and, where do they fit in, and, what group do they fall under, you're going to run into problems, and you're going to, get halfway down deployment, figure out that, oh, there's this other firewall that we never saw, and it's, it's blocking, or, we've got proxy, or, we're pushing things to the cloud, and we don't have the capacity in the cloud to do that. So really think about, everything that's included as part of that architecture, not just, the basics. And so this is kind of what I mean. I mean, if you kind of start out with this, this is great. We kind of know what, overall we're looking to do. But as you kind of start getting down the path, we're going to start saying, okay, well, yeah, we've got multiple workers and we've got a leader, where do those sit? There's firewalls involved in all of these links. So we need to make sure that we know who owns those firewalls, what type of policies are involved, even if they're sitting, in the same data center, same rack, there's still a possibility that there's something there that could cause some issues as we start getting into the actual deployment piece. And then, architect. So, what are these sitting on? Are they bare metal? Are they Kubernetes? What sites are they in? So as you can see, as we start to kind of dig into a lot of this, these basic architectures really start to fill out. And, as you're looking at trying to get things deployed as quickly as possible, like I said, if you can plan all of this out and make sure you've got a really good plan, a really good architecture diagram, know where everything fits, it's going to make things much, much easier as we start to get into that. So, and I could just keep going on with this, so maybe this was, actually in the cloud. So now we got to think about, what do those links look like coming from the cloud into these data centers? And then what do they look like from link sizes? Maybe we got some MPLS out there and we start trying to push all this data across MPLS, and it's shutting down, something that we've got at that site. And so really think about this as you're going through this. And again, most of this stuff is kind of, I'm sure everyone knows this, but it doesn't hurt to kind of repeat it and, stress that in my opinion, the planning phase is going to be the most important part of everything. Get it right up front. As you get into the deployment, it's going to make things just kind of sail by. So we'll go through some slides. I've also got just kind of some demo spurts in here too. I know everyone loves looking at slides all day long, but we will jump into the platform and I'll kind of show you some things. And again, if you pull one thing out of this today, I'm happy with that. Some of this, for those that have been using Stream for a while, is probably, old news, but again, we'll just kind of show you some things that I see new customers kind of come in, don't quite understand, or just don't know about. And so we'll cover those as well. So once we get into deployment, packs are awesome. I mean, I think they're one of the coolest things, that we can do with the product here. It's really about, leveraging this awesome community that we've got, pulling in a lot of this knowledge so that, you're not waiting on, us as Cribl to come out with all these packs and, build all this stuff for you. we've got people out there that have been building this stuff for years, longer than I've even been here. And the ability to kind of put them into a pack, get them out to the community and other people use those, I think is awesome. And now that we've got the dispensary built into it, right into the product, it makes it that much easier to kind of deploy these and get up and running as quickly as possible. And I'll kind of show this. Hopefully everyone's seen the dispensary, but for those that haven't upgraded, I'll quickly show it as we jump over to stream here and just kind of show you what that looks like. And then users. So setting up your users. This is something that I also see a lot where we'll have a customer and they'll be way into the deployment piece. And then we kind of think about, okay, well, how do we want users to access and what do we want to do with users? Think about that up front, because as we start looking at worker groups here, you'll see that, if we start putting the worker groups in and looking at users and looking at it as a whole, you're going to be able to really design it a lot better in terms of, who's got access to what. How do we want to, distribute these worker groups? How do we want to distribute servers? Where are they going to sit? Who has access? All that kind of stuff. If you try and do it after you've already deployed everything, it's a lot of moving. It's a lot of changing. So again, as you start thinking about this, it's not just the architecture of the servers themselves. It's also, how do we want logically all of this stuff to fit in? And so I'll show you what kind of the RBAC looks like on this as well. And then if you're doing, any type of remote authentication, make sure you're looking at that too. We do have mapping to groups as well. So that makes it much easier as you start onboarding users that are going to use the stream platform, that you don't have to do a lot of that manual intervention there. So, okay. And feel free to jump in if anyone has questions, or I guess I can pop open the chat here and watch for questions.
Yeah, I'll keep an eye on the chat for you, Dan.
Okay, awesome. So let's just kind of jump over to stream, break up the slide deck here a little bit, and just kind of walk through a few things. So I wanted to show everyone, and again, hopefully everybody has seen the pack dispensary and kind of how we do that. But if you haven't, let me just walk through that real quick. So in packs here, so it's very similar. You add new, but now we've got this add from dispensary. And so this is going to be all the Cribl created packs as well as our community created packs. So if they're kind of the teal color here, then that's going to be Cribl. And then we've got the community packs here as well. And it's as easy as clicking on it and adding pack. I mean, it's super simple, makes things really easy. You don't have to worry about, going out to the website and downloading it and all that kind of stuff. I'll also show you some cool stuff about kind of how we can update these and keep these updated between groups in a little bit, but just wanted to show you that real quick as well. And then let's take a look, since we did just walk through kind of the user.
Dan, do we have any, just a question in there?
Yeah, go for it.
Any current limitations for packs? I'm not sure specifically what we're talking about for limitations, but anything from that perspective?
Yeah. So Dan, I was just curious, we've ran across a couple with the syslog pre-processing by Michael Donnelly being only used in 3.4, and then the use of packs in the chain command. Are there any other limitations that should be called out or discussed when dealing with packs with customers?
I guess I'm struggling on what you mean by limitations. I mean,
is there a your mileage may vary scenario?
I mean, I guess it depends on the pack too and what you're trying to do with it. I mean, the only thing I've really seen is, and actually just ran into this the other day where, this concept of having routes in the pack. So sometimes, if we've got a user that's kind of new to packs, they don't realize that, once you send it into a pack, it's still going to do kind of the same thing that you would if you were sending it to a stream box. So it's still got a set of routes, and it's got, rules in there that are going to send it to a pipeline within the pack. So I like to think of it as just a black box. We're taking this pack, it's all self-contained. We're going to take, wherever that route points, we're going to point it to the pack. The pack does its thing and then spits it out to whatever the destination is. I don't know of it. I mean, if anyone knows, if you know of any limitations on the packs, feel free to throw them out there. But I mean, other than,
from what we've seen at some of our customers and some of our in the field type stuff and everything, it is very much a your mileage may vary. So like with the, I strongly recommend from a best practices perspective, making sure to stress to customers, read the README of the pack, because just because it says perfect example, David Maislin's amazing pack that transforms all the Windows logs into JSON. That's great. And a lot of people are loving it and everything, but there's implications to that. Right. Sure. If you're sending it to Splunk, the TA breaks, things like that and everything. So like and then the syslog only works on 3.4. I just would, from a best practices perspective with packs, while they are great and somewhat of a black box of how they happen and everything, reading the README and stressing the use of the README to understand what is happening to the data is super critical.
Absolutely. Oh, completely agree. Because and the other thing, and I've got this later on in the deck here, but in terms of updates, and I know again, David updates us all the time. So you really don't have to worry about that kind of being old. But in terms of if it's a community pack, then we are reliant on the owner of that pack to keep it updated. So if whatever we're using the pack for, if they change, or if something in that changes, there is a potential for it to break. So yeah, I completely agree that, it's not a, one size fits all and you throw it in there and you never have to look at it again. It is something that you have to kind of manage, and depending on, where that pack comes from, there could be some additional, monitoring to make sure that, as things change, everything still works. So yeah, as we go from version to version, do the packs still work? And are they still doing what we expect them to do? So yeah, completely agree on that. Cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. So let me just I just wanted to walk through this again, because I do see, I guess I don't see a lot of, users actually going through and setting up, permissions and setting up the roles, which, I think is very useful. We have a lot of different groups that may interact with Stream, and how do I, keep a particular set of, pipelines from being touched by other groups and things like that. So you've got your users here, and I'm not going to go through adding new users. And then we've also got the roles here. So we've got the built-in roles. We can also add roles in here. So if I wanted to say, site one admin, so then I can do a group full, but then I can also specify which site I want to give them access to. So I say, site one. So then I can go into my users here. We'll take Stanley, and then we can add a role. And then we've got site one admin there. So we can save that. So this goes back to the planning that I was talking about earlier, where if you do have different groups, they're going to be handling kind of their own things. Set up the groups, so the worker groups, so that you've got sort of this, segregated piece where they can go in, they can do things that they need to do. If you do want to give, read access to certain groups, I mean, that might be, we'll set up kind of here's some defaults or some templates that you can use, and then have like a template group, and then, people can pull out of that and add to their group. But really what I'm trying to stress here is, use the functionality that's in there to make sure that, people have the right access, and you're giving them, the right permissions on the right groups and things like that. So, okay, cool. Any questions so far? All right, good stuff. So, and I've got a slide in here, but while we're in here, I'll just kind of talk about the user groups or the worker groups. So again, hopefully everybody's using worker groups and kind of knows, what worker groups are and how they function. Your worker groups allow you to, really split things up. So kind of think of every worker group as, its own kind of self-contained. You've got, the ability to do routes, pipelines, all that within a worker group. You can limit access to those, as I said before. And then I think the really cool thing about worker groups is that you can do the mappings for these. So as you bring on new stream boxes, instead of having to, say, okay, group A, set up your boxes, and then, I'll go and create a link and send it to you and then onboard that. You can have like a generic link, which drops them into, which does all the initial setup. And then you can set up your mappings to actually take a node or a stream box as it comes in and assign it to a particular work group. So for this one here, I've got these two workers, and I've got a site 1, and then I've got a site 2 here. So, I could come in here and I could specify, I want this one to be in site 1 or this one to be in site 2. But then I can also just come up here and I can do these mappings. So I can just do host name, dot match equals, and whatever that is. And all of these variables over here can be used, which is awesome as well. So if you want to do it, just by host name, just keep it super simple. If we wanted to do it by, say, platform, or if we wanted to do it by disk space. The other thing about worker groups is you can set different capacities, and I'll show you where that's at. So if I want, a certain worker group I know is going to be handling a lot more data, or maybe it's got some more intensive, functions that it's going to go through. So they're going to be, 8 gig boxes where I want, each of the process to have, 8 gigs. And so I can say, okay, well, everything that comes in over, 100 gigs worth of memory, it's going to go to this worker group and it's going to get assigned 8 gigs. So there's a lot of flexibility in kind of what you do with, with your mappings here. And again, it's really easy. So if I just wanted to kind of do the same thing, I could just do, hostname.match. Feel free to roast my regex there. It's pretty simple, but, and then I'll just say, I want this to be site 2, and that's going to be assigned to group 2. So I just hit save there. And as I said, it's pretty much immediate. So now it's going to assign that one to site 1. This one goes to site 2, and I can have as many of those as I want. So really makes it easy to kind of automate, how you do that and where things are at. And this, again, goes back to planning. How do I want these to be set up? Am I going to do worker groups based on, functional groups within the organization, or am I going to do it based on, memory? Am I going to do it based on, maybe Kubernetes versus bare metal? So really think about that as you're kind of laying out that architecture and what you want those worker groups to look like, and kind of how those are going to fit together.
And hey, Dan, on that note, we've got a question in the chat. I'll let you take a look at it.
Let's see. So can you address how you might use different worker groups for a sustained workload versus workload or bursty ad hoc collection? So yeah, I guess this could be more along the lines of, if you've got worker groups, or maybe you've got a Kubernetes worker group that's able to, spin up additional nodes. And then, being able to kind of send it to that worker group as opposed to more of your sustained, like you said. So we've got, just some, your standard bare metal, or, we don't have the ability to kind of scale up and out on those, or I don't know if that's kind of what you're asking, or, but yeah, I think I would kind of go down that route in terms of, splitting them out based on architecture and where you've got that capacity, as opposed to, more of kind of your functional group. Okay, cool. All right, so let's jump back over here real quick. Okay, we just did demo. All right, so just a few best practices, and these are some things that we pulled out of docs, and some things just from the team here, and just kind of all over the place. Again, a lot of these are kind of of course, but you don't always think about this when you're deploying. So the boot start piece, make sure that's enabled, so that if you do have any issues with the servers rebooting, they're going to come back up, and you're not going to have a problem with that. Make sure your time is synced. This becomes really important as we start looking at timestamps within the product, as we start looking at logs and trying to, compare things and how things, work. Having NTP, having everything synced up is going to be super important there. If you are doing persistent queuing, use a separate volume for that. Again, not mandatory, but it makes it much easier if these are, virtual, if we do have to move those around. And also for performance reasons, if we've got things pushing to a persistent queue, in a different volume on, say, a different drive. We're not worried about, contending with, the drive for everything else. So it just makes it a little bit cleaner to do that. As the docs say, do not use root to run Steam. So no use root. But again, the docs, I think, call this out many times. I haven't seen it yet, but just to stress, don't do that. That's kind of just, standard operating for everything, but it's just security wise, you don't want to do it. It doesn't, we've got the ability in there to run everything as a different user. So, use that functionality. The Cribl.secret. So this, make sure that you have a copy of this. So this is really what we use to do all of the, to encrypt everything. And this becomes important if you do lose that. We lose a lot of ability to kind of, unencrypt things that the platform has gone unencrypted. So I usually, recommend you make a copy of that, store it somewhere else. Obviously, you don't want to, stick that into your Git if you're doing that, but have it stored somewhere where you can always back that up. Obviously, a Linux firewall and SE Linux, if you are doing, if you have those running, keep that in mind as you're doing things like firewalls, ports that need to be opened. I've run into a few things with SE Linux where you try and do, boot start, and SE Linux doesn't like where you stick it. So you have to, make some adjustments to the SE Linux policy to make sure that the boot start can work. So just, again, these are all just kind of, think about this as you're going through everything. If you run into problems, this will kind of help out a little bit, and then be comfortable with the file system and kind of where things live for stream. So pretty much everything is in files. You can get to it. I know that, we try and get away from that, and we want everything to be accessible via the GUI and do everything via the GUI. But as an example, if you're doing, TLS, or you turn on TLS and you make a mistake, or you turn on authentication and you made a mistake and we can't, contact the authentication provider, being able to go in and turn that off becomes really useful, and it's going to save you some time of having to try and figure out a way around that. So, just be aware of where everything's at. And a lot of this, again, is all documented within the docs. So if you're, if you have a question about where something is or what something means in a file, I've never really had to go searching farther than the docs, which is awesome. And then logs. We do have logging in the platform. If you run into problems, there's a variety of logs, and I'll kind of show you for those that haven't gone in and done that. I can kind of show you where that's at, how you would configure those. Those can also be sent as a source. So you can turn on the internal logs within Stream. You can send those to a destination and, get to them that way as well. So just be aware that they're there, and they are very useful. Most of them are turned, mostly down. So you're not going to get a lot of debug logs, but you do have the ability to go in there and adjust those and edit those if you need to. Okay. Any questions so far? What do we have?
In the chat.
Yeah, recommendations on load balancing. Yeah. So, obviously, if you're doing, TCP, we're going to run into kind of the same issue because, when you've got a source that's sending via TCP, it's going to be a continuous source. So, depending on the firewall, what we're going through, how we're kind of, going through that, you could run into that issue where you've got a single, worker process that's handling a stream, and it never kind of rotates off that. So, switching to UDP, there are some options I know with some of the firewalls out there. Where you can kind of, I can't remember what the name of it is, but basically turn that off so that it's not going to, or it's going to reset that connection, every so often. But yeah, I would say, keep an eye on that. It really just kind of depends again on the source that's sending in and what the options are for that. Some of them only support TCP. So yeah, it's going to be dependent on, what's available and what firewall or what device you're going through that's kind of keeping those connections up as well. Okay, so I've kind of talked about worker groups a little bit. But like I said, what's the point of worker groups? You can use these as more of a logical, I want to split things out based on organization, based on, different types of servers that they're running on. You can also do it, like I said before, if you want to have different sites have their own worker groups and then be able to do stream to stream between those and then use compression on those as well. So there's a lot of different uses, I think, for worker groups. It really just depends on, who's going to be using it, if you do have multiple groups using it, or, where all of your stuff lives. So if you've got, sources that live in different locations and it makes more sense to, keep that local and, do a lot of that functionality or do a lot of that trimming or reduction at the site before you send it over, then that makes a lot of sense too. If you're now that we start seeing a lot more of the hybrid type stuff, that's going to become even more important. Do we want data going out to the cloud and then back in? Does it make more sense to have everything done internally and then we send it out? So really think about your worker groups, how these are going to be laid out, and do that up front. So like I said before, it's much harder to kind of move everything around and reconfigure and all that after you've kind of gone through everything. So if you've got everything set up from the get-go, that makes things much easier. I went through kind of the rules and the mappings. We kind of recommend you just get rid of the default worker groups. So set up your worker groups, name them, have a naming scheme for them, and then unless you're using default for, like I said, like templates or something, I've just seen a lot where a lot of work will get done on the default group and then realize that it's not the right group and things like that. So I mean, again, you don't have to, but we kind of recommend that you kind of get rid of that. Changes are committed per worker group. So, when you are doing commits and deploys, those are going to be per worker group. And for those that have kind of gone through that, you'll see in the worker group tab, where each commit is. And then resource settings, which I mentioned earlier as well. So you can configure per worker group different resource settings. So that's, memory, CPU, things like that. So while we're talking about that, let's jump back over here and I'm just going to show you. One other thing to keep in mind if you've been using Stream for a while, is that we did change how you access the UI. So before, I think it was under settings and you can go in there and turn it on. We've moved that out to the managed groups here. So this is where you can turn on, I want to be able to remote into an actual worker. So I can, flip those on. And then when I go to workers, this will hyperlink up and we can jump directly into those there. So when we made that change, I felt like I was losing my mind because I couldn't find it. And then I realized it all got moved. So that's where it's at now. But then within each of these groups, so, if I go into, say, site one, so we do have, settings up here that are going to be specific to, that worker group. So here's your process count. That's really, how many processors do we want to assign, and then memory. So this goes back again to if I want to have a group that's more heavily built out for, larger data volumes, I can, bump this up for that particular worker group, and it makes it, as they come in, they're automatically, I don't have to worry about, when I spin up a new box, going in and manually editing things. I just know that when it hits this worker group, it's going to get, 8 gigs of RAM, and it's, and we're going to, set, whether it's -2 or if we want to hard code something in there. So if I've got a 48 core box, and I want to use, 32 of those, I can specify that here. So, so I see a lot of people that kind of miss the settings by worker group up there. So that's where that's at there. And then back, if I go over here to groups. So again, this is, as you can see, we've got multiple for each group. You're going to have a commit and deploy for those, so you can have, different, have them at different levels and things like that. Okay. Any other questions so far? No, looks good. All right. So let's jump back in here. Okay. So talking a little bit about, once you've got everything up and running, we've got Stream going, routes and pipeline tips. So this is also something that you need to consider as you're designing everything that's going to go into this. Where's that data coming in, how is it going to be routed? We typically, and again, this is not 100% all the time, but typically keep the kind of your highest traffic volume routes at the top. And that just allows you to get as much of that data out of the routes as quickly as possible. Now, again, if you're not, if you're doing duplication of that data, or if you want it to flow down, then that doesn't really, that doesn't really make sense. But if you are doing, data here, this kind of data, first route, this kind of data, second route, work your way down. So think of it as the funnel. You want to get rid of the big things first. And then as we work our way down, we're not processing as much of those events or as many of those events as we get down to the bottom of the route. So it's just, something that can kind of keep down the processing on the boxes themselves. JavaScript functions have a cost. Great post by Brendan. I think he just did it last week or something, but kind of goes through some performance testing of different JavaScript functions and this versus that. So things like, index of and include are going to be much faster than a search and a match. So when you're building out your pipelines, when you're building out, any type of filters, think about what you're doing, and everything that you do is going to have, a cost associated with it on the actual performance of those workers. So just think about that, and don't do some, huge code that's going to, crash everything and just slow everything down. Make sure that you're kind of thinking about, performance when you're building out your functions, your filters, your code, specifically your code function, because you can do pretty much whatever you want there. And you can cause things to slow down pretty heavily if you don't do it right. When using Boolean operators, so again, this goes back to like the filters. If you're doing, a bunch of ands, like I want this and this and this, try and hit the first things first. So if you've only got, one thing that's going to match. So what I'm trying to say is, as you move along, the first one that it hits that's false, it's going to short circuit and it's going to exit. So this again goes back to that performance, where if I've got 600 ands in there, and everything's going to match up until the last one, where there's only a few that match the last one, that doesn't give me a lot of performance, because everything has to run through the entire function before it'll actually short circuit and move on. So again, just kind of your basic coding stuff. Think about that when you're writing this. Finals carry across pipeline chains. So I kind of learned this just by experience. So if you do have a pipeline chain, which is fairly new if you haven't heard of it, so it allows you to take one pipeline chain into another pipeline. Anything that happens in that second pipeline, so if you finalize something in the second pipeline, when it comes back, it's still going to be final. So don't expect, multiple kind of processing there. Or, if you do final in one, it's going to pull it apart when you come across. So, and then this last one, this has got me a couple of times in the past couple of months. So when you do the preview of your data, or if you, capture, or if you, upload some data, the way that the browser kind of handles it is different than the way that it might be handled in the functions. And what I mean by this is that you may have some Unicode characters in there that the browser recognizes, but the stream function may not. So there was a case where troubleshooting a bunch of stuff, everything looked fine. You put it into the preview, it works perfectly. As soon as it starts coming in, everything starts breaking, and it wasn't doing what it should be doing. Found out there was a little Unicode character at the very beginning of the file, and it was just basically causing the JSON to not be formatted correctly. So just think about that. If you run into something and you can't figure out what the problem is, you can always either look at the data directly. The other thing that I've been able to do is, if you just go into like developer preview or developer tools, you can kind of look at what it actually looks like, and sometimes you'll see some extra junk in there that you're not expecting. So, again, I'm calling out all the office hours that we've previously done. The GitOps office hour, that one's kind of goes through the entire, how to do GitOps, what to do. Really boils down to, kind of keep all the testing off your production environment. We do have this really cool thing now that we've got these environment tags. So for sources, you can set, say, a dev, production, testing, whatever. you could set a tag in there so that that particular source is only active when you're in that environment. So it makes it much easier to kind of pull that in and say, okay, if this is dev, then I want to do this. Or if this is production, then I'm going to, use this source or use this pipeline. So you can actually, split those out based on the type of environment you're in. And then automate via scheduled action. So you can commit and do all that via schedules. So if I, come in here to settings, going to get settings. So we do have the scheduled action here. So we can actually do commits. We can do pushes. Probably wouldn't recommend scheduling, commit and push just because you don't know what people are doing. But, scheduling a commit, maybe every night at midnight, where we make sure that, if work has been done through the day, we get that committed. If you're, actually doing external get, then, we can get that pushed out to that as well. And it's really just the matter of, making sure that things get saved and that, you don't have to manually do that all the time. One other thing, use meaningful commit messages. I know this is one of those, no duh, but, when you're going back, when you're looking at this, when you're trying to figure out, where did something change? If you've got, commits that are, hundreds of lines long, trying to go through each line and figure out, where the change is or what actually got happened or, what happened here, who made the change, what did they change? If you've got good commit, if you've got good, policies around, this is what we expect for our commit messages. It's going to make things much easier as you start, if something happens and we need to roll back, where do we roll back to? And in case you haven't seen that, so if you come in up here under your commits, if you click on one of those, you can go back through some of your previous commits. So, if I want to look back, I can actually click, previous and next commit, and these are available in here. So if I need to go back and look and figure out, what got changed, and obviously, again, this is a bad commit message, so don't do that. There's a really bad one. But, this is what you're looking for, add a new route to site one. That's not going to get any data, so just be descriptive in what you're doing. It's going to make things easier for you. If you start getting multi-user onto the platform, other people looking at this and trying to figure out what you did, again, goes back to your commenting on code. Make sure you comment everything so that people know what's happening and, what you're doing so they don't have to figure it out for you. Okay, and how many slides I got? I think I'm almost done here. Yeah. And we've got 10 minutes. All right, so managing a pack across multiple worker groups. So this is, again, something that I think is really useful when you're doing, any type of pack development. You're not necessarily always going to have, a separate pack for every single site. So if you build a pack out and I want to, make some changes to that pack. So let's just take this one I had earlier. So this microservices log. So I'm in site one here. If I come in here and I've got, a function or a pipeline here, and I just want to add, another function to this pipeline, and we'll just keep it basic here. So as I start editing and, adjusting my packs for my data and what I expect it to do, if you've got 30 sites or, 30 different worker groups, going into each worker group and manually updating it every single time is going to be difficult. So we do have the ability within packs here. So if I do this export, so under export target, I can actually select group, and then I can select all the groups that I want that to go to. And then we can do overwrite. By default, it'll try and merge it in. And that's the only option you really have with the groups here. So it'll merge whatever already in there. So then I can just export that. And then if I go into site 2, I know that same pack is in here. If I go into my pipelines, go to this first pipeline, that eval function is in there. So it makes it really easy to kind of keep things, do them from maybe turn your default group into your template group or, kind of your working group, edit everything there, and then you can push those changes out to each of the worker groups individually. So it makes it really easy to kind of do that. Okay. So real quick while we're in here, to just go through sort of your monitoring. So, once things are deployed, once you've, got your pipelines, your routes, everything out there, keeping an eye on the system is going to be important. So how do things look from a memory perspective, CPU, load, really, as with anything else, you want to keep an eye on this. And the nice thing about this is you can also send these out, like I said before, with oops, that's not what I wanted. So let's go into site 2 here. The sources. So we do have the system metrics and the Cribl internal down here. So if we go into system metrics, this kind of gives us the ability to send out a lot of those metrics. So we can do CPUs, memory, network, disk, all of that. So if you're not specifically coming in here and looking at the dashboard for your stream boxes, if you want to send this off to another monitoring platform, if you've got, some sort of, charting platform that you want to send it into, we can do that as well. So that's something that I recommend keeping an eye on. I mean, no matter what happens, you always want to know how these, how the workers are functioning, if they're functioning at normal, if we see spikes, anything that could potentially point to, a problem. Somebody throws a function in there that all of a sudden, pegs a CPU and everything slows down and, crawls to a halt. Being able to monitor that is definitely important. Which also points to our notifications here. I don't see a lot of customers using this yet, but it is available. So we can do notifications. Today we support for targets. We support webhook and PagerDuty. So if you do use PagerDuty, webhook is obviously generic, so you can send that to pretty much anything. But this allows you to set up notifications on, some of your sources. So, if we hit, if we do go into queuing, things like that, being able to get those pushed out to, say, a PagerDuty or something like that, is going to be really useful. So you're not, again, having to come in here and look at everything every day. You want to get notified when something bad happens. So that is available. You can also, as I said, go into your, so let's see if we go into sources. We're looking at syslog here. And this is one of the one that's not going to have it, of course. Yeah. I don't think it's all of them, but and I'm probably missing it, but can you hear me?
Oh, now I can.
Okay. Utilize the notifications. It's just something useful that we've got in there, the ability to let you know. And I believe that we're looking to add more types of notifications in there as well. So keep an eye on that. Internal metrics, we covered that. Logs, we covered that. And then, with about 5 minutes left, I'll just kind of throw this out here. So professional services, obviously, since I'm from professional services, I got to put a plug in here. But, really our goal is just make sure that you're successful in your deployment. I mean, we get brought in pre-deployment, we get brought in deployment, post-deployment. So wherever you're at in your project, we're here to help you. We do utilize community Slack as well. So if it's something that you can join, or if you are joined, we'll typically set up an internal channel just for PS and customers so that we can interact. It's much easier than, bouncing emails back and forth. So if that's available, definitely utilize that. And then if we are going to be doing any pipeline development, anything like that, having sample data available is, almost always going to be something that we ask for. It just makes it much easier so that we can play around with it on our side. We can, build the pipelines out independently. Sometimes, we realize that that's not, not possible. But if you can, have sanitized data that at least gives us a good representation of what those events are going to look like, it makes things super easy for us. Or easier, and makes it much quicker. And then in terms of self-help, hopefully everybody that's on here, is part of the community, knows about all this stuff, but never hurts to plug it anyway. So we do have a certification coming up soon. Keep an eye out on that. Curious.cribl.io is available. So that's our forum. You can go out there, you can ask questions, you can kind of, find answers. Really cool. Community Slack, obviously. And then for those that haven't gone through the sandboxes, really useful if you haven't played around with Stream before. We've got a ton of different, scenarios, and it really gives you a good idea of, what the product's capable of, how to do it, where things are at, and gives you kind of a nice intro, and also some advanced topics as well, which is cool. So, and that's pretty much all I got. Yeah.
Got one question here in the chat. So notification exists for license expiration. Is there anything for license overages or anything like that at this time? Do you know?
I don't think we have overages. I think it's just an expiration, I believe. I'd have to check on that, but I don't think we do it for overages at this point.
Okay. Something we might need to get in the product, Josh. Any other questions or comments in the chat? Yeah, thank you very much, Dan. That was great. Our topic for 2 weeks from now is still up in the air. Waiting on, it might be Cribl Edge, might be cloud. I'm still sorting that out. So we'll have something out shortly. But appreciate everybody's time today. And thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, everyone.